Yesterday, I published a video addressing a story which had been released 2 days earlier by ESPN surrounding the Brazilian Luminosity players of Luminosity, and who obviously Luminosity, who are the major reigning champions from LG Columbus, and a story that they'd signed contracts to play with SK, but then changed their mind and wanted to go back to Luminosity, where they had letters of intent to sign a 2-year contract, which they claim are now binding. And ever since I published this video, and I'll link the video up there in case you need to catch up on all the story, Luminosity players, FalleN came out and said he would say something about it. The Luminosity owner was all over the place on Twitter. They actually made comments on Reddit after they published their side of things. FalleN wrote up his side of things, quite a lengthy statement, and published it on Daily Dot. And as a result, I'm going to spend this video going over that and doing a similar thing, looking for holes, contradictions, where things are like omitted, but suspiciously, where elsewhere you provide information. And here's the thing, I want to say at the top of the video, I have a lot of respect for FalleN as a CSGO individual. His in-game accomplishments are fantastic when you consider his team's only been around for like a year and a half, and with the multiple changes and not many resources to work with. His community work is admirable, the stuff he's done in Games Academy and now trying to bring it to English and help the community out and learn how to play the game. I think as a player, he's probably the best AWPer. As a general player, he's one of the best all-round players in the game. I think he's probably the best in-game leader in the game. In fact, he might even end up being the best in-game leader we've ever seen before history's finished. That's how phenomenal his impact's been and the way he's been able to bridge tactics and letting his players have autonomy and working with the different personalities of the team. But you know what? All of that is irrelevant to this discussion. Because this discussion, when you talk about FalleN and his statement here, is about FalleN the person and the way FalleN the person judges his ethics, his morality, and what he's going to do with his life and what he thinks is right and wrong and the actions he takes. And ultimately, how good he is in CSGO, how smart he is in CSGO, and the things he's done for the community are irrelevant to this discussion. Now, as I pointed out at the beginning of the last video, I'm not on SK's side. The notion that I just presented SK's side, took it all as fact, and just stated it, and I agree with their opinion, is ludicrous. I mean, there's things I certainly don't agree with SK's opinion. Like, for example, as more information has come out, and as I've read FalleN's side of things, I actually think that one area SK might have fallen down, as I'll mention later, is I think that when they say they took the letters of intent to British law offices and German law offices, I think a mistake they might have made would be to ask where were the contracts drawn up? Where was the letter of intent drawn up initially? Because I know in the past from talking to lawyers who are involved in esports that it's very different dealing with German law than it is the law of the state of California, for example. And if Luminosity is based in LA and the players are in LA, maybe it's a California contract, in which case maybe the United States government deals with tortious interference, poaching differently. Maybe it's not just a North American sports league. Maybe it's written into the way their government works. I don't know that. I'm not a lawyer. So that is probably something that I wonder if SK looked into and whether that is pertinent to it. But we'll have to see at some point after this video whether someone can actually come up with information showing whether that's the case or not. Because whether the letters of intent are truly binding or not is one of the key issues which no one really resolves here. They just keep saying, when it says binding, that means binding. That's not a lawyer telling me whether that's the case or not, or giving me a legal decision. And by the way, in these cases, it's very rarely the case. I know this from talking to lawyers and law students. It's very rarely the case that something is legal or illegal. That's the whole point of the court system. You get the lawyer to say, is there a case could be made here? And then if he's a good lawyer, he'll say, it cost you maybe this much, and here's sort of your chances to win it. As a result, these things can be argued. That's why you need legal precedents. That's why you need this process. That's why you need people to be able to argue back and forth and give different evidence in different circumstances, because the law can't fit every single circumstance. That's why we have the process of this. It's not just a computer saying, well, did you break this law? Yes, then you are guilty. It doesn't work that way. Circumstances and context are everything. Also, there's another aspect to this story which wasn't brought out well in the last video because the ESPN piece didn't bring it out well, which is what is the WESA, the World Esports Association, involvement in this? Because if they are involved beyond some individuals who happen to be part of it being involved on an independent basis, then that is something to be concerned about, and that is something we should consider, and we will later in this video. So we're going to go through FalleN's piece, and we're going to break it down as we go through it. Now, in the tweet, the opening part of the tweet to this article said, "Here is mine and my teammates' official response to recently problems we got in and how it all happened." Now, it's worth pointing out, the majority of this piece is actually FalleN's perspective. He very rarely actually gives you the teammates' perspective. Like, he gives some vague allusion to they wanted more salary or something, but he never actually talks from their perspective. That's why, even though at the end of the letter, it's all signed by all the members of the team and the coach and the manager, that doesn't really work out entirely. Like, I'd love love to have three people's opinions here. I'd love to have like FalleN's opinion. I'd love to have Zeus as the coach or the manager Dead. And then I'd love to have one of the other players translated from Portuguese. What was he thinking when he's in the situation? You don't really get that. You get FalleN's perspective and interpretation of what their interpretation and their perspective was, which is key to note here, despite the fact that someone brings it up and suggests that maybe this is only FalleN's point, and then he actually says on Reddit, Zeus created this text with me, buddy, or I'm here bullshitting my entire team and faking I speak in behavior of them. Jesus, ... Now, regardless, we'll ignore that and continue on. So it starts with a section called To Situate You Before SK Approach. Binding letter of intent signed, LG extended contract. This is all quoted right now. Going back on 10 December 2015, before going to vacation, we play ESL ESEA in Burbank. You know, that's a tournament I referenced in my last video. So at this point in time, the team has only had one big result with the new lineup, which was the amazing run to second place at FACEIT Stage 3, DreamHack Winter, where they actually took Fnatic to 3 maps and were 1 map from winning the tournament. So they've only played one tournament and they've had a massive jump up in their results. So no surprise that Luminosity wants to upgrade their contracts and get them a better deal and sign them in there. You want to get them then, because otherwise someone else is going to get them for more money later. So, okay. Before they play ESL ESA Burbank, it was on that tournament that we signed and made a new deal with LG to next year. We signed a binding letter of intention that had all the changes we would have adapted to our old contract. LG started here's a key part. LG started paying us the new salary right in the next months, being completed 2 payments before all the SK history, because SK history starts in February, came along, which means they were fulfilling their new commitments. Now, here's a key aspect. We'll address some of that later, but when he says that it's binding, this letter of intent, is that information that he knows now and is applying retroactively, or did he know at the time it was binding? Did his teammates at the time know it was binding? Because if they knew it was binding, why was it ever any confusion to his teammates and to him that later on someone says, oh no, it's not binding. Oh, okay, well, yes sir, even though it said binding, I just now believe you. Now on Reddit, he says, our binding letter of intention literally starts with the word binding. It is binding. We checked that. About the contract, it was expected to be sent in 14 days, not obligated. So that's what's interesting immediately. First of all, it's binding, but what is binding in it, Fallen? You don't tell us what is binding in it. And you say it said the word binding, and it was binding, and you all knew that, yet later in the story, you repeatedly seem not only confused, but to very easily be convinced or told that it's not binding. And when it says there that the contract was expected to be sent in 14 days, but not obligated, what's the point in signing binding stuff if something like that's not going to be held under the binding aspect? Really? Is that the way you're going to do these things? So, okay, why was the confusion for other members of the team? Not only that, but if people are going to use the angle of, but they don't understand English. First things first. Fallen, Zeus, Dead. People who all speak English, people who are in leadership positions. Fallen, the captain of the team. Zeus is the coach. Dead is the manager. These 3 people against the 4 other members of the team, that's a pretty good debate you could have right there. It's not just what Fallen against 4, it's 3 against 4. And not only that, it's the 3 who are in leadership positions, who understand English and who understand the contract better. Second question, was there a Portuguese translator translating the details of this binding contract, the letter of intent rather, to the players before they signed it? If not, then how can you at later points in this story and the Luminosity owner come forwards and repeatedly state that SK tried to get you forwards without legal representation and that some of your players don't understand English and that you tricked them, manipulated them? Did you provide a Portuguese translator and a legal representation for these players to check the letter of intent before they signed it? If not, you can't then turn around and use the same logic on your opponent for something you didn't do, because by your logic, how could they understand the letter of intent? How do they understand English in this scenario? I imagine they probably didn't, because they didn't mention it at any point here, yet they constantly bring it up elsewhere. That's an interesting omission to the story, isn't it? But keep that in mind, because it's going to be a relevant point. So let's keep going. SK approach. First time I have ever received a message from SK was when I received a mail from one of their owners, Alex, on February 3rd. He said that he was interested in signing us on SK. I quickly answered that I was honoured to receive that kind of message and then proceed with the exact answer, "Hello Alexander, how are you doing? As we are in contract with LG, all conversations about switching teams and kind of things must be directly done with Steve, aka Booyaka, LG owner. If you want his contact, here is his mail." Then he removes the first part of the mail, at luminosity.gg. As you may know, but it's good to point out, I never take decisions or judge what is good or bad for all of us by myself. I let my teammates know that they contacted us. I never replied later replies, but other teammates decided to start to talk to them. Now he says there that he never takes decisions to judge what is good and bad for all of them. Yet later on, there's these scenarios where repeatedly he presents it that he is the only one standing against the move, and that he is repeatedly, before the move and then after the move, urging his teammates not to do it and then to go back on it. So which is it? Do you never take those decisions? Do you just go along with the group? Or do you actually tell them, oh, I don't make decisions and influence you, but guys, we can't do this. This is wrong. My opinion is wrong, is that this is wrong. And even though all of you vote it's right, I don't think we should do this, guys. Should we do this? That's a contradiction right there, mate. Okay, how does this make you an honourable person? So you say you don't make decisions and that you don't make decisions for all of us. Okay, how does it make you honourable that if your team is going to do something you think is wrong, then because you imagine yourself in some sort of fucked up democracy within your team, you say, well, this is ethically wrong for me, but since 6 out of 7 people vote that this is right, I'm going to go along and do it even though I alone know it to be wrong and they don't consider it to be wrong. That's worse. If they don't think it's wrong and they're doing it, they're actually less culpable than you, who in your heart of hearts apparently knows and thinks it to be wrong and is going along with it just because the rest of the groups go along with it. That's not being honourable. That's not standing up for what's right. Also, why did your teammates start talking to SK? You address that later, but this is something I'd get out right at the beginning here. Your teammates start talking to SK from day one when you get contacted. And remember, apparently they don't understand English very well. What? They don't come back to you. They don't go and get a Portuguese translator themselves. They don't get a lawyer themselves to check it's fine. What are their motivations to talk to SK? Why don't they go and talk to Luminosity before they talk to SK? Why don't they like Luminosity? Why are they so open to SK's agreement or another team's agreement? These are all questions Fallen doesn't address at this point in time. But here we go. Next paragraph. Teammates decide to talk to SK. At the beginning, I didn't know what to do about the fact that some of my players wanted to keep talking. Let's pause right there, Fallen. How about talk to your owner, Booyaka from LG, and tell him, listen, our teammates want to talk to this guy, and I know that we're under contracts and that they're binding, so I know that it's wrong, so what do we do about this, mate? No, you don't do that. You keep that secret. So you didn't know what to do about it. Well, there's a simple solution someone like me would tell you in the beginning. Do you not know anyone else in the esports community, Fallen? You have all these friends. You're one of the most beloved figures, one of the most respected figures in all of esports. You know players from other teams. You know the other team owners. You know other, even loyal people within esports. You could reach out to some of these as a friend and ask them what to do. You don't ask about any of that. You didn't know what to do, so you did nothing, apparently. Then his quote. From one point, I didn't want to be the guy that would not let my teammates look for more information or opportunities. On the other hand, I knew that they shouldn't be doing that because we just signed and agreed weeks before on a raise, contract extension, and new contract between LG and us. So contact your owner, tell him the situation, get a group meeting together, resolve it all very quickly, no problems. Nothing can happen at that point in time. You don't do any of that stuff. You don't want to be the guy who shouldn't tell them that. And so what? You just take no action whatsoever. His quote again. No differently from other organizations, it's normal to have some small issues. We have been through growing pains, expanding fast and trying to improve daily, both players and organizations. This part is so suspicious and we will find out why later. Here's a Reddit comment though at this point in time, because he starts to address why his players would want to leave Luminosity. So here's a Reddit comment by Fallen. So my teammates did not have enough patience to wait Steve/LG fix some problems that was happening within our org. Remember, the problems he never addressed in the ESPN piece. They wanted little better salaries, more money to gaming house so we can get a better place. Pause right there. They wanted little better salaries. You just agreed in a letter of intent to better salaries and a 2-year stay of that. Doesn't match up, mate. Were they giving you better salaries? Were they good salaries? Were they already paying you the better salaries? Why do they want even better salaries at this point in time? Doesn't address that. He just says it as a fact. They wanted more money to gaming house so we can get a better place. Continuing what he says here. People are different. As we started winning, some of them felt they deserved more and wanted it too fast. And indeed, they deserved. Wait a minute. Did they deserve it or did they want it too fast? But it's just not that fast. As you see, within 2/3 months, all those problems were fixed and we are in a much better situation. Unfortunately, most of them didn't know how to handle the situation. Seems like you didn't, mate. You never spoke to your owner. Unfortunately, most of them didn't know how to handle the situation and got greedy with all the things SK was telling them. Believe or not, the situation of not being able to look to Steve on that meeting make everyone regret what they were doing. It sucks, man. Have you ever had that feeling? knowing you are hurting someone plans. Steve worked his ass off to get where we are right now, and we're sending this to trash. That's what they felt. It took a lot of time to realize it, but it happened. Yet at no point in time did you ever talk to this guy who's a friend of yours and you built with and you thought was doing great things for you and was even already paying you the higher rate, despite the fact you haven't signed the contracts yet. No mention of that. So here's another Fallen comment, couple more that he made. Problem was they wanted better salaries and more money to get a better house, which they already have now. They deserved it but wanted too fast. As you see, within 2 to 3 months, it's all possible now. Also, they wanted to fix some problems where sometimes we got small delays on salaries and prize pools. I didn't mention it because it wasn't really a big deal as it wasn't for long times. First of all, it is a big deal. Secondly, you'll find out that Fallen's idea of short and long times become radically different to what you or I might call a long time later on in this story. And thirdly, that is worth mentioning, Fallen, especially because it's not the case that every other org and every other team does this because of growing pains. It's not as simple as that. Another quote by Fallen. LG has been working for a long time on new deals and sponsors, and they are very good on what they do. Let's say winning a major helps it to happen too. They are way more capable than they were months ago, same as the team quality. Wait there a second. They're way more capable now than they were months ago, and winning the major helped them. Therefore, before winning the major, maybe they couldn't get the sponsors to provide the things that you wanted, hence why you and your team didn't talk to the LG owner and you were willing to sign a contract with SK. How have you not bridged that gap in your own logic, Fallen? Well, how's that working, mate? You seem to be setting up your own path of destruction here with your own comments that they contradict each other and leave obvious gaps where you've purposely omitted the information and told your cool little story without characterizing this reasonably. Because of these problems, some of our players thought wrongly that they have the right to go out and start looking for other teams while on contract. Today, they realized this was a mistake. Now, why did they not get their own lawyer at this point in time? SK tells them, by the way, those letters of intent aren't binding. So why don't they get their own lawyer and say to him, is this true? Are the letters of intent binding? Not only that, get their own lawyer to represent them and their interests. Get one that speaks Portuguese, that has good English and Portuguese and understands the law of where the letters of intent were made. Get someone who fits all those bills, pay him a little bit of money, and you'll have the answers. You won't have to trust SK. You won't have to believe what the letters of intent from LG said. Then you will know instantly before you make any other moves. This is a contract where if you add up all the money that were going to be paid for bonuses, all the money for extra stuff like flying family members in, all the salary that they're going to get, this is a contract which collectively for all seven, I guess, might be worth over $1 million. But you can't spend a few $100s to get an hour or two of a lawyer's time. You can't even get a lawyer who's a friend of yours to look over this stuff before you do it. And yet this is months you have to do this. You have months to think about it, to contact people, to believe what people are saying. Ignorance is not an excuse, my friend. In this scenario, I'll tell this to any player. Hire fucking legal representation when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars each. It's a very low amount of your money contrasted to making sure you don't make a $400,000 mistake or whatever it might be. So let's continue on. Fast growth. You also need to understand that everything happened so fast for our team. We went from an unknown group of Brazilian players to the best team in the world within 1 year. A little bit over that, but okay. That also reflects that LG had to adjust several times in order to compensate, accommodate, and modify themselves to keep us satisfied. And I will let you know, they have done a lot in the aspect to make us happy. That means often they needed time to get more sponsor money, find new sponsors, hire more people, etc. This is the mainly reason why I never wanted to leave LG. There has been some small delays on prize pool payments, but nothing too big. LG always paid us, and we know that compared to other orgs, that we have knowledge, we have good percentages on sticker money, prize money, etc. So it has always been a fair relationship. LG has always take good care of us and never take advantage from our position. They have always put us players ahead of themselves. Why does he try to make it sound like every org has these salary and prize money delays? I mean, it's minimizing the issue and characterizing the things that your org's done wrong and hasn't been able to deliver on as though they're minor things, and yet you maximize small things that other people have done. It was a big enough deal that your teammates actively tried to participate in leaving your org. If not for SK, for other orgs. They were out there talking about this. And not only that, they don't even feel the need to get a lawyer or to get these things checked. They already think, well, this org isn't paying me and they're not doing enough anyway. Maybe your people already thought, we haven't signed the contract. It doesn't count. All the rest of it. Your team's thinking the things that SK later are claimed to have manipulated you into thinking before they're even necessarily doing so. Interesting. Continue on. Official contract being fulfilled but not yet signed. Binding LOI signed. The letter of intent said that they would estimate a full contract within 14 days. However, the basic terms of this agreement were very clear. During some attempts in next tournaments, LG owner Steve tried to bring us to the conversation and sign the new contracts. I saw the contracts myself on 2 occasions. Now, here's the thing. From talking to other people, perhaps there would be a legal precedent where if the LG owner created the contracts and tried to get them signed and everyone had signed this binding letter agreement, maybe that does keep up his end and does to some degree make these contracts in some sense start to go into effect. I'm not a law student or a legal expert, so I can't say that. But if the players are the ones who then delay it after signing a binding contract, are they not in any way breaking the rules in some way? Do they not get any punishment for anything like this? Let's continue. Due to the team being focused in playing the tournaments, plus Steve not being too concerned or rushing about signing it because he trusted us, we ended up delaying signing it because it wasn't our focus and never separated time to do that. Here's a lesson to all owners in esports. There is no such thing as a friend in esports until business is squared away. Once business is squared away, you can be friends all you like in that little gap between business and the perception of what you're like with each other. Until they have signed on the dotted line, it doesn't matter if you're pals. Doesn't matter if you've had drinks. Doesn't matter if you've given each other back rubs. Doesn't matter if you went to Disneyland and took a picture with each other on whatever that thing where you go down and all the water splashes up. Doesn't matter if you did any of these things together and shared a birthday together. Until they sign, there's no business and friendship do not mix in that way. So if the letter of intent says contract within 2 weeks, you get the contract within 2 weeks, as Fallen claims this guy did, and then you make sure it is signed. Likewise, for players, once you have agreed to this letter of intent, you yourselves have now said that we're going to sign this contract, essentially. So once that contract comes, you sign it immediately because you've agreed to that and that's the terms you wanted. Therefore, there will never be these issues. This story is dead immediately if they just signs the contract immediately. This is the part that is suspicious about everything Fallen's saying, because he's taking facts, literal facts, like we got it on this day, and then instead of leaving it there, like we didn't sign it, he then gives you his interpretation, but he tries to make the fact follow the interpretation as though they were the same thing. As though the fact was that they had the contract, but it's not a big deal because Steve trusts us and we were going to sign it later. First of all, what's he doing trusting them in this particular scenario? Let's go to this next quote. Steve tried to bring this conversation to the table and we kept postponing it till we didn't do it. Why is that? Why did you keep postponing it till you didn't do it before you'd even had an offer elsewhere? Why would the players keep postponing it if they signed the letters of intent, binding ones that they wanted to uphold and they wanted the new deals and they were even getting paid the new salary? Not only that, they postponed it for months and never did it in the end. Does this Steve guy, Booyaka, owner of LG, not know how leverage works? He should have demanded this was done. Never mind trusting them and all. No, you demand. They've signed a letter of agreement and a letter of intent. You now demand that they sign it. If they don't sign it, you don't pay them the salary until they've signed this. You pay them their normal salary, but you don't pay them the elevated salary. You don't send them to tournaments. Well, I guess you can't really do that, actually, and that might be within your original contract. But essentially, you force them to sign it. You make the issue come to a head and it is solved one way or another. Either they sign or you know they're not going to sign. He himself opened up this whole vacuum into which SK and others came in, predators, and he allowed this to happen. It never can happen if he forces them to sign and if they're honourable and just sign immediately. They allowed this situation to occur, yet they blame everything on SK and he never blames his players for this particular aspect. It's SK manipulating them and causing them to believe he's the devil. They already thought that they didn't want to sign your thing already, mate. They already were ignoring it. They already were thinking that they deserve more, that you haven't even offered them enough salary, and they're already actively looking, not just for SK, but elsewhere, as I've said with the FaZe rumours, which you find out about later. It's not the way that the Luminosity guy presents it. Why is he so dishonest constantly? If he has all the facts and the evidence on his side, and he certainly has some of it on his side, why is he constantly weaving this story and this narrative and painting people as the evil guy and trying to put all attention over there and none onto other aspects of it? If you've got all the facts on your side, present the facts, let them speak for themselves. You want to speak for the facts. So let's keep going. It is important to point that Steve has been fixing everything we discussed in the meeting during December 2015 and started paying new salaries and new amounts right after it, even if without the official contracts being signed yet, which means for everybody it was valid. Now this is actually a very good point for Luminosity, for Booyaka, and for the notion that they're going to stay with LG. This is a very good point here, because based on the little I know about the way court aspects deal with things, and by the way, particularly in Germany, based on some things I know about SK's past with contracts with Fnatic, I actually think that I've heard that courts in Germany might see it that since a player, since the guy has started paying the elevated rate above his normal salary amount, in line with what the letter of intent salaries would be, and that the players have accepted the salaries and are acting accordingly within the org, and aren't just saying, oh, you sent me too much salary by accident. They're essentially agreeing to the terms of the contract. It just hasn't been signed yet. So they're actually acting as if it was there in the spirit of that contract. Therefore, that might get upheld, that they knew that they were under the new agreement, and that actually might be the case. So that's a point for Luminosity. And that's one that he hasn't raised himself, and he hasn't done a good job with. But that is something for him. And notice no other journalist, no one else has brought this aspect up. In fact, that aspect that they were getting paid more wasn't even in the ESPN article. So let's go on. SK trying to convince players. SK told us right in the beginning to don't share the infos we were discussing about with anyone. He knew it was wrong, and so do us. Pause. Then why did that stop you from telling Luminosity? Why, Fallen, did you not go to Luminosity and tell them this? In fact, there's a warning sign. He's telling you, don't tell anyone about this. First thing you do, go to Luminosity. Someone's telling me not to tell you about this, and they're going to offer me a new contract and all this. And I think the team, I'd worry about them. You don't do any of that. Continue with Fallen's statement. SK knew we had a LOI to extend our contract signed, and not only didn't respect it, as they said they would when they first approached me, but helped inserting into my teammates' minds that they don't have to fulfill our contract with LG. Stop using that kind of terminology. Manipulated, inserted into my teammates' mind. No, they told your teammates something. Your teammates chose to believe it. You can't take all responsibility away from adult human beings who are professionals with $100,000 contracts on the table and millions to be earned. This isn't someone coming by and getting someone who doesn't speak any English and just tricking some 15-year-old kid into swapping his bike for a little golden penny that turns out to be fucking copper with gold on the outside. It's not like that. These are actual adult human beings. Also, at this point in time, check with a fucking lawyer. Notice your teammates don't go back to the org either. Your teammates send him the letter of intent. Perhaps in Germany and UK, as mentioned in the SK statement, maybe the letter of intent would not hold up. Maybe California law is different. Again, these are all aspects that we don't see addressed in anyone's fucking statements, including the LG owner. Let's keep going. If you take a look on the conversations my teammates, and later I, had with SK, you gotta understand that they tried to convince us that it is easy to leave LG. Pause. Except we can't take a look at those conversations. You haven't shown us anyone. No one's seen them except ESPN seeing some emails back and forwards. And so we're just gonna have to take your word for it here. And if this ever does become a court case, odds are you're not gonna release these details early. Therefore, that's kind of dirty, I think, to say, well, if you were to see the convos, you'd totally believe me in the way SK treated us and tried to brainwash us. Oh, wait, I'm never gonna show you them, so just take my word for it. No, you don't want me to... Funny hell, these people tried to paint it that I was giving SK's side and just believing that. What evidence do we have for this? So let's continue. They asked for our details on our contract, asked for LOI, send it to their lawyers, and gave us reports that we would never had any problem in that situation. They could free us. They also mentioned that they would pay for anything that was needed in case of we going to court. So at this point in time, again, when someone's telling you, yeah, you know, I'll even pay the money in case like you get taken to court, you never think at this point in time still to spend $1,000 for like 3 to 4 hours of a lawyer, maybe even a Brazilian lawyer, someone who speaks Portuguese. You never thought to do this. By the way, when you're talking about adults in legal matters, if you go to court and you say, oh, but I didn't know, Your Honor, and I don't know much about the law, ignorance is not an excuse is what they will tell you. You will still be guilty of whatever crime you have done. It is not an excuse. If your English is so poor, even if you can't get a Portuguese lawyer, get someone who speaks the Portuguese fucking language to translate to you. Problem solved. Why are you not providing Portuguese translators yourself? Well, why does SK have to provide everything? Even though, as I said with the LOIs, we have no proof you ever had Portuguese translator or a lawyer to help you with that information that you had to understand. But it's okay because it's the wonderful Luminosity org, not evil SK. Why does SK have to provide all these things when you are adults doing deals for 6 figures each? Why don't you take some self-responsibility as a professional? Back to Fallen. On my opinion, we had an agreement. Steve was doing his part, so on my point of view, we should continue to do ours. Yet you still never spoke to Steve. Back to Fallen. On one side was all my teammates willing to do something else and me standing on LG's side. I gave up trying to convince them that what they were doing was not fair. Wait a minute. Wait. Why did he give up? So, but why would you give up? I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not going to be able to convince them and make them do it anyway, still hold your ground though, mate. Don't just say, yeah, I'll just give up. I guess it's fair enough, whatever. No, why would you do that? So if enough people in your group want to do something that you consider ethically wrong, you use the word ethically later on, ethically wrong, you'll just go along with it. They can convince you to do something wrong, but you don't exert your influence and you don't decide for them and you don't have influence over them, even though you think that you're morally right and ethically right in this situation. What the fuck is this shit, mate? This is such a contradiction and a mad hole in the story. I can't even believe people aren't addressing it. You are an elder statesman of Counter-Strike. You're a fucking legend. You're someone everyone respects. Your team respects you. And what's more, think about this. What are they going to do? Go without you? And lose the fucking best in-game leader, best AWPer in the world, and what, just pick up someone else and hope they can continue? I don't think so, mate. You have insane leverage over them. You're not an equal member of a 5-man or a 7-man unit. You have the biggest say in all of this, and you're willing to let them convince you to do something you think is morally wrong, ethically wrong, rather than you exert any influence over them. Doesn't work, mate. That you've allowed them in that scenario to do something wrong in that case. You've stood by, you've initially let them do it, and then eventually you've joined in with them. That doesn't wash with me, mate, especially when you present yourself as some like person who follows his morals and his ethics, as you do in this Reddit comment. So at the end of a Reddit comment, he says this line: I will always fight for what I think it's right. Doesn't matter if it's harder. Whoa, wait a minute. What happened to that statement there? I gave up trying to convince them that what they were doing was not fair. And later on you say you signed the contract. What happened to always fighting for what's right, even if it's harder? Oh, you just gave up. So here's another quote. They had been well instructed by SK that they had better options and that they deserved better. SK even said that the new salary from LG would be a good offer if they didn't have a better one from SK. Okay, I don't really know what the point you're making there. Like, SK told him it was better off. What does that? What relevance does that have to the story out of interest? No, it never addressed, of course. Next section. Teammates decide not to sign anymore after SK approach. I like the way that says. Sign anymore after SK approach. Okay. He means with Luminosity. Later, after February, remember that shit started in December. After February and SK approach, Steve tried to make us sign the contract in next tournaments, but it was my teammates who started to avoid it because now we had a situation where a new team was looking for us and had convinced us that LOI wasn't valid and only if we signed would we be stuck. Still no legal check. Why are they avoiding it? It's them who's avoiding it, not Luminosity at this point in time. LGO just accepts that. Okay, you're avoiding it. It's now been 2 months you've avoided it. You won't even talk to me about this issue. I can't get you all in a room to do this. Out of interest, why can't you get them all in a room? Don't they all fucking live in Los Angeles? Isn't that where that guy lives in California? What, he can't just go to his own team's house, sit down and say, guys, I've got everyone in a room, all 5 players, the coach, the manager. We made this agreement. I've got these contracts. It's now been 2 months. What are you delaying for? Why aren't you signing still? Does it never happen? Why doesn't it ever happen? What, he just trusts them? I don't trust people who let me down over 2 months at a point in time. I'm not naive like these people, apparently. And obviously in these scenarios, their idea of trust and loyalty is to just let everyone that you like fuck you over constantly, and then you have to do whatever they say, no matter if you think it's ethically wrong and business-wise fucked up. Yeah, that's not my idea of trust and loyalty, mate. Here's FalleN's Reddit comment. I agree, we messed up and we didn't have a lawyer at the time we signed with SK. We only got one later after reaching out to Steve about wanting to sell the team. So even after they signed, they didn't have one. They only got one when they wanted to get Steve to sell the team. Problem is, my teammates got convinced that what we had signed wasn't binding, even though, as he states, it fucking said in the title, binding. Again, guess they just don't understand English, right, Fallen? You understand English, you know what binding means. You didn't check with anyone either. Apparently Zeus didn't check with anyone, Dead didn't check with anyone. Everyone just pushes all the responsibility off themselves onto the fact that they come from Brazil. And they can apparently never understand English to understand what binding means. I think that's incredibly condescending to yourselves and other people from Brazil. I know some people from Brazil with fantastic English, mate. And I know people from Brazil who have computers and can use Google and everything, mate. We not only believe that it is after talking... We not only believe that it is after talking to lawyers, but we want it to be as well. Because we don't want to act like we were doing. We regret the decision we took. Then later on, it says yes, when people ask about them inviting SK to LA to have a meeting about this before they sign. Yes, that happened. They came to LA after talking to my teammates by mails to discuss and present themselves personally. There was no representative from ourselves, just us. Why didn't you provide your own lawyer? Why didn't you provide a Portuguese translator? You know what? I think Zeus, from what I can tell, has pretty good English. I know he speaks Portuguese. Why doesn't he translate into Portuguese for taco, for cold zera, for pho? Why is this not going on? Why are we pretending like they don't have a Portuguese translator when these guys act as Portuguese translators in many respects? What exact, very specific nuance of the law made you think that the word binding didn't mean binding? Or made you suddenly believe what SK is saying in this sense? Doesn't add up, does it? Let's keep going. And again, you push the responsibility onto SK to provide that. Did Luminosity provide representation and translation for you when you did the letters of intent? Did they? Why don't you take responsibility to provide your own lawyer, your own translators? You're the big boys dealing in business now. In your country, this is like fucking millions of pounds, and you're just wasting time not getting any legal representation. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. Yeah, you did. Don't spin me that bullshit. Next section, Fallen decision to take. I mentioned to my team, and they can prove that, if asked, that what they were doing was wrong. I had a super stressful day where it even passed into my mind leaving LG and creating a new team. What he means there, by the way, is not going to SK. He means leaving the players of Luminosity and making his own team because he thinks what happens wrong. So he would consider going to a new team without the Luminosity teammates over still just going to the Luminosity owner and telling him what's happened before you've got to sign. Not only that, or he would consider leaving, making his own new team, rather than just tell the players he's with, I won't do this under any circumstances. If you do it, it must be without me, or you must kick me out the team, or I must take a stand, and I want you to come back on my side. This is what he'd choose in that sense. Mate, I'm sorry, that's just cowardice. I don't know any other way to phrase it. Those three options do not make sense. That is the one that you thought was the only one even worth considering. Not making a stand against your teammates, not telling the Luminosity owner. You were literally instead considering just leaving the team entirely. So just running away from your problems, right? Not actually facing up to a difficult situation and doing what you think's right. Next statement. I couldn't stand the fact that we were going beyond our own words. For me, it is not a question of signing a paper or not that makes me being loyal. Yet you then later in the story literally sign a piece of paper with someone else and therefore, by your own metric of loyalty, become disloyal. They kept saying that because of some organization problems and the fact that LG didn't send us the contract in 14 days, they were free to look for something else. I said that was not true, mainly because he was paying and fulfilling his other commitments for 2 months already. Also pointed that it was our fault lately that we didn't sign the long-form contract. Yet you're the one who's made these problems seem very minute before, not a big deal. Why are they such a big deal for your teammates? You made out like LG were the ones who sent the contract and your teammates held off. Why are your teammates now making out like LG didn't send the contract? Like LG's the one who didn't fulfill their end of it. That doesn't connect together. That doesn't match up. Where is your manager in all of this? The job of your manager is that he doesn't send the contract to Fallen or to Cold Zera. He sends the contracts to the manager, Dead. Dead takes the contracts to the players and says, we signed the letters of intent. Now we're all going to sit down and sign these contracts like we all agreed to. Problem solved. Or your manager then knows that he's not going to have the contract signed. Something's holding off. Your manager, if he's loyal to his org, who he works for, he doesn't work for the players directly. He then goes to Luminosity, the org, and says they're not going to sign the contracts at this time. They're holding off on it for some reason. And at least the Luminosity guy can look into it. None of this is done, apparently. Fallen again. I had to make a choice. It was rather sticking with my friends and accepting that it was a team decision or leaving them. I thought the choice was between doing what's right and wrong earlier on in this statement, right? But now it's just between, well, forget what's right and wrong. I now have a choice. Do I stick with my team or do I go elsewhere? Suddenly, ethics have just gone out the window. The law's gone out the window. Letters of intent have gone out the window. Binding's gone out the window. Contracts have gone out the window. Now he's just got a choice. Do I stick with the teammates I play with now or do I go somewhere else? And he makes the choice to stick with the teammates. He's given up every other aspect of honor, loyalty, what's legal, what's ethical, just because he wants to stay with his teammates. That's the choice he makes here. Now let's go to his comment. I need to say that I felt super bad with all this. Pause. Doesn't matter how you feel, mate. It matters what you did. I need to say that I felt super bad with all this happening and considering moving along. I did talk with my family and other important people for me, and they made me realise I should stay with them. Pause. Your family and other people who are important to you are not legal representation, and these people apparently are convincing you to go along with your teammates and sign the contract with SK. Are they manipulating you to think LG is the devil and that SK is the way out? This isn't mentioned in any of the other statements. Funny how these omissions happen, and then interesting factors come up to excuse away what you've done that you think's ethically wrong. Back into the statement. Made me realise that I should stay with them, even if I didn't agree with it. Our team could have split because of that. Still never talked to a lawyer of his own, despite spending months and talking to family members and people important to him. Never spoke to a Brazilian lawyer, never spoke to a lawyer who understands Portuguese, never spoke to a lawyer who understands California law, never spoke to the Luminosity lawyer owner still about this issue. Back into Fallen. Players want to go back in old contracts. Together, we decided to tell LG that we no longer wanted to represent LG until 2017 and that we wanted him to sell us. Weird, because there's no pressure so far mentioned that would make you do that. SK make a deal that your teammates eagerly want to take part in. You eventually, after talking to your family, get convinced you should do with it, should stick with them no matter what, no matter whether that's the right thing or whether that's the hard thing would have been leaving or fighting against them. You decide to do it anyway, and now you're going to the Luminosity guys to tell them you want to be sold before they even know that you've got a chance to sign a new contract. This doesn't add up with the story we were told in the ESPN article or by Booyaka. So let's continue on. We were on a very difficult situation because we couldn't be 100% transparent, as he had no idea we had an agreement with another organization. Pause. Transparency does not mean he knows everything. Transparency means you tell him everything. You didn't do it. That's why you can't be... We can't be 100% transparent because we are not telling the truth. What the fucking tautology is that, mate? Back in the statement. We pointed SK in this direction once again and told them that we would only leave if Steve was somehow fairly compensated for what we did together. Which doesn't make any sense, by the way. Why would he be fairly compensated? If you thought the letter of intent wasn't binding at this point in time, and that your new contract starts after your old contract ends, then he is being compensated by you playing for him up till the end of your contract. He doesn't need any more compensation. He's the one not paying you slowly and getting new sponsors off the back of you winning the major. But it's all about this guy and how you have to be fair to him, right? I love the way this is painted. Did this guy have like a gun pointed on you while you were writing this? Back into the statement. Oh, and by the way, now put in PS, Booyaka is a wonderful person and has great hair. What the fuck's going on here, Fallen? Back in his statement. That was super naive from our part, as of course SK knew that our contracts would theoretically ending, I don't know why he put stuff like that, ending in July. There was no reason for them to spend a real buyout deserving of our team's worth knowing that. Right, what does that mean? That whole part of like deserving of our team's worth. No, there's no buyout, mate, because the contract ends. At the end of the contract, you're not with them anymore. They don't own you. You're not slaves. You're not chattel. You are work for hire. You are paid your day rate, your weekly rate. You do your responsibilities, and at the end, that's it. It's not about that this guy needs to get his big payoff because he helped you in Luminosity, or that your team's worth more. No, at the end of your contract, your team's worth whatever you're willing to go to another team for. Has nothing to do with your old organization. Back in your statement. So, of course, their conversations didn't progress. Except, by your logic, the contracts of SK aren't legit, you say at this point in time, and therefore you don't need to worry about that, right? Except that's the problem, right? Let's go on. And also, you thought that the letters of intent weren't legit, so why would they need to buy you out for something extra valuable from this guy? Back in your statement. It's good to point that on the negotiations we had with SK, they would reimburse all the money we would be losing with LG as we were trying to go back in the contract extension. What fucking cads, eh, to offer that, eh? What devious, horrible people. Wait a minute, what? That sounds pretty nice, actually. No extra comment on that. That's just presented as some sort of damning claim. Back in a Fallen. Steve tries to sell team. Besides that, the relationship between players and Steve was not the same anymore. Pause, created by you, never talking to him. Months on end, ignoring him, not signing the contracts, never telling him why. Back in, all created by you. Back in. Because he was disappointed that we thought it was possible to go back in the LOI, as he had been fulfilling his duties. He tried to explain to us, even bring a lawyer to the discussion to show us what we had signed was actually a real thing, pause, before they've signed with SK, back in, but we had already made our decision, believing we were in our right to leave and that Steve would get compensated. So he couldn't get you to understand that the letters of intent were binding with a fucking lawyer present. You are not legal experts and you have not consulted a lawyer. He couldn't get you to understand with his lawyer there that you had no legit contract with SK, that his contract is legit, that the letters of intent are legit, and that you've essentially already agreed to them in that terms. Why do you not believe that? What? Oh, I know what it is, guys. Booyaka forgot to provide Portuguese translators for you, didn't he? Oh, so you didn't know what he was saying in English. Oh, that tricky English. He's got you, hasn't he? Oh, but that's, yeah, you never mentioned if you had a... Did you have a Portuguese translator now? Oh, was it your coach? Is he a translator? In that case, you've always had a translator. Oh, interesting how it works here. Interesting the holes that are left in this story. And he couldn't convince you despite bringing a lawyer and telling you this is not the case. These are real LOIs. You didn't believe him. Not only that, you had already made your decision. Yet, so far, we still had no mention of pressure from SK. That comes later. Back into Fallen. Steve, understanding that we no longer wanted to play for him, started to look into the market for another organizations. This is where the FaZe rumor came up, and we received another proposals from other teams. Notice that Luminosity owner Booyaka doesn't demand that things go his way, despite the fact he's got the law on his side and lawyers. Guess what? He doesn't want to go to court. No one does. He doesn't want to force players who don't want to play for him, even though they've got a contract and he can force them. Same reason this guy is going nuts. This guy, the same guy, is the one going nuts to everyone else that you're trying to steal what I've built. And yet he's then himself going out looking for other people to buy the team, allowing them to go for other organizations before they've signed. And yet he's then painting it later like, you're trying to steal what I've built. Notice how he's always appealing to like art, emotion and unfairness and all this. He's never just going on the facts in that scenario. So, okay, back into Fallen. Why we signed with SK. This was a super crazy moment in our lives as we had to focus on playing the next major, brackets, biggest tournament in CSGO history, and solve this organization situation. We are very amateurs on business. We are young, and most of us has never been through those process. All we wanted is to solve it as soon as we could before the major, to play it the best we could. We definitely made a mistake there, and we are the only ones to blame. I'll give him this much, okay? That even including Fallen, it is the case that they're amateurs in business. The whole it's young part doesn't work that way. They haven't been through the process before, sure. And so Fallen makes a Reddit comment like this. Sir, we never said we didn't understand the contract. I mean, you did later on claim like the whole English thing and it's unfair to go out, but you didn't understand the contract. Okay. You said that you didn't, you never said that you didn't understand. I mean, it's essentially been implied multiple times. Your owners even suggested that you wasn't given representation, etc. And that's something you don't speak English. Back into your statement though. The situation is we signed a contract while we were still contracted. Also, SK approach to this situation is illegal. Signing a contract and being inside a mess like that means you are not a business expert. Otherwise, this would never happen. I mean, you can fucking say that again, mate. But if you're not a business expert, consult a business expert. Consult a lawyer. Back in his statement. Also, I never signed a contract to play in any Brazilian team since 2004, 2013. I'll give you that. You don't have experience with contracts. You haven't done it up to 2013. Okay, fair enough. Still, ignorance not an excuse, I'm afraid. I mean, you don't give SK an excuse that they are ignorant of Californian law or whatever in this case. They claim that they're legally on the right in Brazil, in Germany and Britain. But you don't give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Continue on with Fallen. Back in the statement. Also, as was discussed in some meetings with SK, they told us that if we wanted to get into WESA, WESA, World Esports Association, a new organization that we didn't know too much about on that time, we would need to go fast into signing it, as they said that the window to join would close in the coming weeks. There would also be a signing bonus. Remember, WESA teams get money from WESA, and with our lineup, they were 100% guaranteed to join it, which is obviously correct. Now that is some shady shit that we will touch on later. It's not mentioned in the initial story enough. ESPN just alludes to it by just bringing up the Rolf Reichart part with no intimation of what he did or how he affected it or any of the specifics. Didn't have any statement from him. And SK just denies outright that these people were involved at all. But we'll have to get into that later. Fallen. That led us to one day before traveling to the major, where we decided as a group to sign the contract. Biggest mistake of our lives. Wait a minute, you decided as a group to sign the contract. Does that include your manager and your coach who speak English and who know about the scene? And in theory, your manager presumably gets paid salary and works for Luminosity. What, does he have no loyalty to them as an organization? Back into Fallen's statement. At least it gave us some tranquility to focus on the tournament, which we didn't have since we started talking about those things. Now this is so weird, because if I was all torn up and conflicted over signing a contract, I'd have anything but tranquility if I knew what I'd done was wrong. It almost sounds like you were at peace with the move, as the word tranquility implies. You thought it was all done and dusted, it was all legal, it was all fine, and finally you'd put the ethics issue to bed. I mean, maybe ethics affect other people differently than me. Have you ever heard of the dark night of the soul fallen, where you're tortured over the things you've done and the way your life's gone and the predicament you're into? You don't really have a peaceful night's sleep in those scenarios. Ever read Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart and understand the implications of guilt and the way it tortures the mind when you've done things that you know on a deep level ethically are wrong and against your moral code? Apparently, this is all fine for you. Once you decided it, because remember, as you said before, for you, it was just a decision in the end between staying with that group or leaving. And you chose to stay with them, so you were at peace with it. You weren't torn up in this particular way. I don't know why you then present and mischaracterize it that it was so hard for you. Because apparently you were tranquil, and then you went on to have the best tournament ever and win the fucking major in incredible fashion. Cold Zero certainly wasn't torn up. He was having the best tournament of his life. Next statement. Regretting our decision. During the tournament and after winning it, we had the chance to talk personally with Steve. We didn't even have time to celebrate our win. It was a very shit situation because we felt, and actually we were going into his back. We signed something going over the contract we had signed with him. You hadn't signed a contract with him, you signed a letter of intent. I remember being on the dinner table and not being able to look into his eyes. Now, listen, I realise people make mistakes, and I hope you grow from this because this is cowardice what you're describing here. No one of us had the courage to admit we signed it, but later or sooner we admit it. You would imagine that he would be super mad with that news, but it wasn't really what happened. He was so disappointed as he saw his friends betraying him. Pause. Friends who don't talk to him about this for months and being approached. Friends who don't talk about the fact that they think his letter of intent's not legit. Friends who don't bring up other issues. Friends who don't even ask him if he can match the offer and keep them in the org. Friends, but only from one side, his side apparently. Pause, back into it. And we felt exactly the same thing. There is no worse feeling than doing something wrong for someone that has always looked out for you. Okay, that's all dynamite stuff, but you didn't anticipate any of that when they signed. It only him being sad and going, okay, guys, I understand, and I still love you, and I'm disappointed in you. I'm disappointed that you've betrayed our friendship this way, but I will always care about you, and I hope you have a good life. That's the only thing that made you change your mind and suddenly realize this was all wrong and get lawyers involved. Get real. Also, the way you say this, like change your mind, let's later on look at how long it takes you to change your mind. It's not a day. It's not one little meeting has it. It's not some hard night of thinking that happens. So let's continue on. We went back to the hotel and had a team meeting. Everyone was feeling super bad. We felt that this kind of action was not part of who we are, and we would fight to change that. Coincidentally, after you've won the major, got a load of money that's going to go to him first, and in this situation, now he's just looked sad at you across the dinner table, and that's made you suddenly realise it's all bad and the letter of intent to bind it. Get the fuck out of here. Doesn't even seem very plausible. Also, this story again makes it sound like you had the dinner with him, you won the major, you didn't get time to celebrate, you go back to the whole team meeting, and then you decide that you're going to do something right. But let's look later on at how long it takes you to change your mind with SK. And what about your contract with SK, which you think is legal now and you've signed? How can you now go back? If that's not part of who you were, well, surely part of who you are is being loyal to organisations and upholding what you've done. You thought his letter of intent wasn't binding and that the SK contract is. You've signed it, so by your own loyalty rules, you shouldn't have to stick with SK, right? No. Let's keep going. But we had just won a major and the prize money could change all our lives. Even though we felt bad, we had to be very careful, ... What the fuck is that? Pause. Even though you felt bad, you had to be very careful, ... First of all, little English note for people who don't know. ... is not a pause in a statement. It's used that way online, colloquially. ... actually means that you've removed another part of a statement because you didn't think it was relevant and that you're just putting together like two different parts of a statement to one where there was a break between them and something else was said. Now, he's not saying that, but he's saying it as if even though we felt bad, we had to be very careful. Why do you have to be careful, mate? What are you worried about with wonderful Steve, who's always done things right and he's always upheld his part and he sent you the contracts to sign and you didn't sign them and he started paying you the salary and he's always done right by you. He's never denied you prize money. He's always paid when he can. He's worked to build the... Why are you very careful on him? Why are you worried now that you've got this life-changing money about what he might do? Let's go back into it. It's not... And also, by the way, that like ... makes it seem like fill in the blanks there as to why I would be so careful. Back into what he says. It's not that we thought Steve would be capable of holding our part of the shares, but it's just something that came into our minds. We had never imagined to see this kind of a large prize. Like I said, this is life-changing. Right, that part there, that sentence, it's not that we thought Steve would be capable of holding our part of the shares. Then the next part of the same sentence, but it's just something that came into our minds. That is so contradictory and such sophistry, the way it's phrased. It is ridiculous. So you didn't think or conceive that he would hold back the money, yet you were worried about exactly the fact that he might hold back the money, and that's something you have to be concerned about. Does worry not occur in your brain as a thought? Do you believe in Reiki, Fallen? Was worry just some sort of negative energy around your body, but not inside your brain where your thoughts were? Did you just feel inside your waters, or maybe you threw the I Ching sticks or looked in tea leaves that trouble might be brewing, even though you yourself felt content in your heart that there's no way he would do something like that? Doesn't make sense, mate. This is contradictory. Back in your statement. We went to MLG and asked them if it would be possible to receive the prize pool directly if needed, giving LG their share beforehand and sending us the remaining. They said it was perfectly fine as they had a similar situation in the past. First of all, everyone in Reddit who's an expert claimed that that's not how the prize money works, that the prize money goes to the players directly from Valve, and that it's not the case that it goes to the org first and the org take their share then sent to the players. Yet, we know that Luminosity has had this team play in majors for them before, as far as I know. Let me think. Let me double check. Yeah, they did. They played at Cluj-Napoca with Luminosity. So presumably, Fallen already knows that the money goes to the org first, then they take their part. That's why he now goes, even though he claims he's not worried about them taking the prize money, he then goes and essentially is worried and says to MLG, can you just please send the money to us and send LG their share? Because you're obviously worried they will take your life-changing money away from you. Despite the fact that you apparently already at this point in time, remember you already had the meetings, you've already decided to fight what's right, you already want to stay and want to fight the SK contract and stay with Luminosity and your beloved owner, yet you're now acting in a manner where he's not going to get the money sent to him directly because you don't trust him. Back into what you're saying. It's good to point it out because of course we were concerned about the prize money, but it wasn't what made us want to stick with LG. We could have our money either way. Even SK Organization guaranteed they would pay us in case LG withheld our money. With all this information, we saw that we still wanted to stay with LG, and we were 100% sure it wasn't about prize money, and because we actually wanted to stay. Pause, then why are you getting the prize money sent separately? Back into it. You're going to speak with them for 2 years, remember. It's also important to note that LG has never threatened us to hold our prize money. We were just worried. In fact, they consistently told us that they would not hold our prize money and not to worry. Whether they tell you that's irrelevant, mate. Steve said that he just wanted us to be happy, and if we wanted to be sold them, it is. Then why do that? Notice the action on the side of the players was taken regardless of friendship, whereas LG earlier on let friendship stop action being taken, forcing them to sign the contracts, bringing it to a head. Why aren't you signing these contracts? See who fucked up in business here. Luminosity, the org, they thought friendship was the way you act. The players never acted on friendship, and as a result, they got what they wanted in this scenario. So then someone asks him on Reddit, someone asks him, so I have a question, Fallen. Have you received the prize money from MLG? And if so, did it go through LG or did MLG send your share directly to you? Because you mentioned that you asked MLG about it, but you didn't specify exactly what happened with the prize money. Fallen answers on Reddit. It still was not being paid, but it will be paid directly to LG. Then it will come to us. It takes some time. That's completely normal. So why is it now changed to going back to Luminosity? Also, it's going to Luminosity, yet all those Reddit experts claimed it never goes to the org first. Interesting how details change in all the contradictions. Back in your statement. Timeline letting SK know about the situation. SK sent their contract on 21 March. We signed it one day before leaving to the major, 26 March. As soon as we get back from that travel, with our decision made, we tried to let them know that we no longer wanted to be part of SK. They told us to grow up and the contract was signed. So they signed the contract, then go away and decide they don't want to do the contract anymore, but they just signed it themselves. So if they knew the contract wasn't legit, how could they sign it? Where's their culpability there? Being under contract to someone and then knowing that's not right, but then signing a contract with someone new. So shouldn't there be punishment for players who sign 2 contracts? They act as if the law is important when it's other people being dealt with, yet when it's them, they think, oh, that's not how it works. I only signed for a little while. No, you signed, mate. You signed. And if you signed and it was binding, you signed. It's never I only signed for a few days, though. No, it's not how it works, mate. You can't be almost pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not, mate. He then tries to appeal to the whole, we only signed for a few days. And yet, let's skip forwards in his statement and get this, guys. Ready? Remember, it sounded like they had the meeting after the major, a few days after they won it. It's like 3 or 4 days after the contract signed and they realise it's wrong and they're going to go to SK and tell them, get ready for this. I agree and understand we made a very big mistake, but we never received anything, not 1 cent, or started working with SK. Pause. That's because your contract begins after July July 1st onwards. Why would they have sent you money already? Doesn't even make sense. And the fact that they haven't sent you the money yet doesn't change the fact that you signed a contract with them. If it's not a legit contract, why are you even bringing this up? This wouldn't be relevant. Interesting. Back in. Also, the timeline between we signing and not wanting to stay anymore was very short. Let me come out of it a second. Get ready for this. Very short. For me, very short might be 2 to 3 days, like winning the major. Let's say a week maximum, a day or two after the contract's been signed and you've gotten home. No, get ready for this. Very short. This is his idea of very short. Also, the timeline between we signing and not wanting to stay anymore was very short. Brackets. Time of going back from major plus Malmo trip, 22 days. 22 days after signing the contract, they approach SK and tell them they don't want to do the contract anymore and they're going back on it. 22 days to think about Booyaka, to think about Luminosity, not to have that meeting in the hotel room and then act on it immediately. They don't even contact SK immediately. They went 22 days to play in another tournament as well as the major, Malmo, then go home. Malmo was the week after, remember? 22 days before they decide, we're no longer in this contract. So you were under contract for 22 days, mate. Wasn't just a few days. Wasn't a very short amount of time. If my girlfriend says, where were you? Well, what do you mean, love? Well, you haven't been here for 22 days. Oh, just was off having fun with people. Don't worry about it, love. Nothing happened. You think she's just not going to think I was fucking around with women in Cuba having a mad party? 22 days! Are you out of your mind? Back in the way he says, as we previously said, we are very amateurs and we don't have many laws knowledge, even more when this is all about a lot of different countries in the same problem. First of all, 22 days short period, get real. Secondly, ignorance is no excuse, and please stop playing the fucking, we are just amateur, we have no knowledge of law and our English is not very good. Well, in that case, get a professional, get someone who knows about the law, and get someone who speaks Portuguese and can translate for you. You never did it at any point in time. Ignorance is no excuse. Now let's keep going. We spoke with our lawyer. Oh my God, they've got a lawyer involved now. When it's SK, they get a lawyer involved. When it's Luminosity, fuck that. We spoke with our lawyer and he got in contact with SK. From this day forward, we players never talked to SK again. 2 days later, our lawyer says he talked with SK lawyer, Pietro Fringuelli. It was communicated to us that we could be out of ESL leagues, that we could receive an injunction and not be able to play CS during the contract time. He also made very clear his connections with ESL and WESA were very strict and our team would be penalised for that. This is the lawyer that was from WESA and commissioner of WESA. First of all, why would anyone believe that you would be kicked out of the leagues and that they could have an injunction to stop you playing Counter-Strike? Surely your lawyer, who you are having contact, Pietro Fringuelli, tells you, don't worry, he can't do that. That wouldn't happen. Surely you go and tell the Luminosity owner, Booyaka, and he says, don't worry guys, that can't happen. We will fight against it. Don't be concerned. You are the major champions, the reigning champions of the major. You have all the leverage in the world over ESL. Think about ESL when teams weren't allowed, like Renegades wasn't allowed a spot in Pro League. They're a small team. They're not the fucking major reigning champions. Think about when other teams, Tempo Storm, don't get an E-League. People throw a fit. People go mental in the community. They hate those orgs. How unrealistic and naive to think you could be the best team in the world and you're going to be kicked out of all these leagues with no backlash to ESL. And then it's going to be able to do this and it's going to be fine. So unrealistic, so naive. And once again, you never consult experts who could tell you otherwise. This is also, by the way, if it's true, and it later comes out with evidence that there was fuckery from WESA in this aspect, I do think this aspect, separate to FalleN's case, is very significant and should not be overlooked. If there is anything to this case, then it is huge. If WESA and people involved with WESA either directly putting pressure on teams and orgs to do things, else they'll fuck them up through WESA and ESL leagues, or even just implying it and using the name of those people. WESA should try and distance themselves from these people in the latter case. Also, remember, there was precedent for this in the past, where there was a situation with G2 and FaZe, where Richard reported a story that FaZe G2 brought in Jens Hilger, a guy who was formerly a head person at ESL as far as I know, but I think now just has some titular role and doesn't necessarily decision make there, to imply that he would get them kicked out of ESL Pro League if they went to this other team until they agreed upon a certain amount of money. So there is a precedent for that I think should be looked into by someone. Now, interestingly enough, in this scenario where they come forwards with Pietro Fungelli and legal stuff and emails apparently saying that he'll use their leverage to kick them out of ESL Pro Leagues, why don't they ever leak it to a journalist to put pressure on ESL not to do it? Why isn't there a story just about this topic, regardless of the SK contract issue? But anyway, on Reddit, there's then a backwards and forwards between the Flying DJ, Ulrich Schulze, who's a head guy at ESL, and Fallen, and then Booyaka, the owner of LG. It goes like this. The Flying DJ. Fallen was never threatened with exclusion from ESL League specifically. A legal injunction would not mean not being able to play tournaments for LG or any other brand, which would then include ESL tournaments, but would also include others such as E-League, ECS, etc., and would be something everyone is bound to by law and not up to the organisers to decide. Fallen response. So who would decide which tournaments we play? Well, he just said it's a legal injunction, mate, as in the courts would say you can't play any tournaments under this net team. Is Fallen at any point in time ever going to consult fucking lawyers to ever get legal expertise? Or is he just going to play Perry Mason himself and watch enough TV shows that he thinks he can be a lawyer? So here's a statement. So who would decide which tournaments we play? Valve? Sorry, the Flying DJ, but don't try to avoid it. Someone himself, Fallen, who's avoided loads of shit and left loads of emissions. Ralph was one of the owners in SK, supposedly sold it 1 week ago before it all came up. We have proof from other SK owners mentioning on Ralph's position about getting us as soon as possible in order to join WESA. There is a conflict of interest there, and yes, they made it very clear after we let them know we wouldn't like to play that there would be retaliation. Get some evidence together, mate. Show it to a journalist, show it to a lawyer, show it to someone. Back in his statement. I don't want to fight with anyone, just don't help covering what SK did, which you know was wrong. We have the right to play where we want, plus we don't stand by this shady negotiations. Flying DJ responded, if you had reached out to me, I would have told you right away that there would be no retaliation from ESL for any of this. We are, however, bound to law, and an injunction would be something that basically tells you and your players that you cannot represent, i.e. play for, any organisation in CSGO tournaments. That's not a decision up to Valve or any organiser. Fallen. Yes, that was not what has been told to our lawyer after reaching SK lawyers. We could have handled things much better indeed, but we gotta fix what we think it's right. Thanks for info. In comes Booyaka like a bull in a china shop. This is total nonsense. We aren't afraid. Stop threatening us passively or directly. In what way has he threatened you there? He's just said that if in this scenario someone had got a legal injunction against you, that it would have stopped you playing. He's not saying we are going to. This guy is so paranoid, it makes me very suspicious about him. Not only that, he acts in this... I realise he's around Brazilian players, and I've seen the Brazilian players and fans react this way. They never react with facts and on the basis of actually what's right. They react like hysterical 12-year-old girls at their birthday party when everyone isn't playing exactly the game they want to play. And they just paint everyone else as the biggest evil villain in the world, and they're just this innocent person and everyone's against them and it's so unfair. So here's a statement. We aren't afraid, so stop threatening us passively or directly. It won't work. How do you excuse the fact that ESL owns a majority/equal share of SK Gaming, which competes in ESL tournaments? Pause. Which one is it? Majority or equal share? That's very significant detail, mate. Also, are they controlling shares? Are they shares that involve voting? Are they just shares that you just have a share in the business and you don't have any say in it? You don't mention any of that, yet you're willing to start saying that they own a majority/equal shares. Back into it. How do you excuse the fact that the lawyer who is the acting commissioner of WESA, owned 50% plus by ESL, threatened my players with being excluded from ESL and Germany-run tournaments? So later on, a different person, asks him, he says, you are pathetic. It's LG and LG team that's fucked up majorly here. SK is in the right and so are ESL. Edit, for those of you wondering, he edited his comment because actually, here's a detail. There was a part at the end of Booyaka's comment that originally said something along the lines of, like, Ralph is caught, WESA is caught, SK is caught, you will all face the music. Some like mad threatening thing himself. And then he removed that himself. And when he's asked why he removed it, he says, yes, I was asked to, I agreed. I also think it's important to focus on facts and not involve my emotions/disgust. The above questions remain unanswered. If you'd have done this from the beginning, mate, you would have made your position a lot stronger. The problem with your whole agenda is that you didn't stick to facts. You attempted to interpret them from other people, then demand other people accepted your interpretation, and thus set the community agenda against certain people without providing any evidence yourself, just saying the evidence exists. Back into FalleN's actual statement. To finalise, in our opinion, We feel awful about all this messy situation we created. We are going through a learning experience and mistakes were made. It's hard for us since we came from nowhere and achieved so much in a small short of time. We had no counselling through most of this. Pause, your own choice. Back in. So even though these were mistakes, it was the best we could do at the time with so many things happening at the same time. We would like to make it clear that we have not and would never use SK contract to get a better offer from LG. As you guys may know, SK wasn't the only organisation that came to us in the recent past. First of all, didn't tell you all about the other organisations. Secondly, you wouldn't use an SK contract against Luminosity because you love them so much. You'd just sign that contract, leave Luminosity in the dark entirely until you'd signed it, and not give them a chance to counter-offer or make you a better offer. How honourable. Back in his statement. What we didn't realise was that the move made by Alex and SK was actually something called tortious interference, which is illegal not only in sports. Googling it, you will conclude it means they are interfering with a team that is actually under contract for their own benefits, doesn't matter if it's later or not. Notice he never looked into this either, and he claims that SK are ignorant of that, or that they knew it and they were doing it anyway. And yet, he never looked into it himself, and his ignorance is okay, but no one else's. Back in a FalleN's comment. I tried to alert them on the very first mail they sent to me to talk directly to Steve. Later, after all negotiations, they told us they would give us a $1 million open check as safety. Then I ask you why they didn't go to Steve and try to buy the team by correct standards if they could afford. Why didn't you go to Steve? You keep saying they should do it. They're not obliged to. They're going to sign you at the end of your contract. You're signing a contract to play at the end of your Luminosity contract. You're under contract to Luminosity signing contracts. And now you're not going to Steve. And yet you keep asking why he isn't. It's funny how you can look at someone else's faults and not your own, mate. Back into his statement. If it wasn't for this relentless approach and their lies about being okay to discuss about theoretically setting up something for the end of our contract, we would never be in this situation. Pause. No, by that linear logic, the reason why you're in that situation is because you didn't sign the contract sent to you within 2 weeks multiple times by Steve and you kept avoiding it. That's what allowed SK to get into it if you want to use linear logic, which I don't agree with, but back into this. Of course, we are here to blame for not handling that in a better way. Being ourselves naive and greedy sometimes. Pause, not sometimes, pretty much on all occasions as far as I can tell. Even with SK, you waited 22 days and took your sweet motherfucking time before telling them you weren't going to work with them anymore. Back in, here we go. Notice how he shifts all of the blame on this, except in a small minority aspects, to everyone else. Despite their minor mistake and then waiting 22 days to tell SK and then never telling the Luminosity owner before, then never giving you a chance to make a counter offer. Paints themselves as these great people who love the org and they wouldn't use an SK contract against them, and they knew it was wrong after 4 days, but they waited, another 18 days before they actually did anything about it. Here's a quote. We are proud to be part of LG. We like to be there. We feel home and we want to keep writing history together. We will keep improving, not only in game, but in life decisions as well. Well, how convenient. Funny, I wouldn't leave my home to go to someone stranger's better home for a load of money. But that's because that's not my home in a business sense. That's just somewhere I work. And as a result, the way you acted didn't suggest it was your home. So you see how many holes there are, even in FalleN's side of things. But I've no doubt all the pleb Brazilian fans will be like, I believe all of this. Because that's the kind of that's how honest you guys are intellectually.